Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chaz Kayato, and today I'm going to be discussing the next chapter in the dissertation process. So I'm currently wrapping up chapter 4, and this is obviously with the American College of Education. I've been going through each chapter with you guys as I come to the conclusion. So technically this is week 9, so I have a little bit longer to go, but I have already received my TOR, the Teacher of Record approval for Module 10, which is the last module. So for all intents and purposes, the course is completed. I just need to get a final check off, but that is more of a formality at this point. So the course is technically titled Res 6551. The course is titled as well, Chapter 4, Analyzing the Dissertation Research. So just to reiterate this process, you start with the first dissertation course is your concept paper, which isn't actually a part of the dissertation, but it actually does set up a really solid outline for it if you end up sticking with pretty much the same ideas that you had originally anticipated. Now, sometimes things can change, and we can talk about that. But chapter 4 comes after the dissertation proposal, which is the first 3 chapters of the dissertation. So essentially, after the concept paper, you go to chapter 3, and you write chapter 3, then chapter 2, then chapter 1, and those first 3 chapters have to get approved because you're actually just preparing for the research at that point, which the research comes in chapter 4. So you have to get approved with the first 3 chapters to do the research, and that's why they call the first 3 chapters the research proposal, because it's essentially what you're showing to the school, to the DRR and IRB, and you can go back and look at the chapter 1 video to see more in detail about that process. But now in chapter 4, we're actually doing the research. So we're data gathering. So as something that you'll kind of see as a theme, and I pretty much mentioned it with pretty much every course that we've gone through so far, the more that you can do prior to day 1 of class will help you so much. So this was another course that I was lucky enough to pretty much be done with by the start, and that is not the case for everyone. This is actually the point of the dissertation where you can get caught up and set back easier than any other point. Even chapter 2, which is the longest chapter, it's still relatively straightforward because the literature review is just really compiling information that's already out there. Whereas with chapter 4, you're generating new data yourself. And so what does it mean by generating data? And to be fair, I need to go back and say this. This is for the qualitative paper. A quantitative paper that uses data that's already available, you would not have to worry about time delays as much unless for some reason you took on a large task that takes a significant amount of time to parse through the data. And there are some people that do that. So you need to be careful about the amount of data that you say you're going to go through and the amount of data points that you're going to look at, because that could set you back in quantitative. But from a qualitative standpoint, we are generating new data that doesn't exist yet. It's our research that produces the data. And where are we getting the data from? Well, we're getting the data from participants. And so as soon as you got the IRB approval in chapter 3, or chapter 1 really, in chapter 1, you should go ahead and you should start working on contacting those participants, setting up ways to contact them, It's very, very important. That little piece of, and I say little, it's not really that little, but that piece of the chapter is going to make or break if you can do it on time. Okay, so you as the dissertation writer, you get to choose how you want to do your research. Now, of course, it does have to be approved by the IRB, but the IRB doesn't tell you you have to do interviews, or you have to do focus groups, or you. It's up to you how you want to get the data from your participants. And so when I was doing it, I recognized from even the concept paper that this could be a serious hindrance if I didn't have access to a lot of people that were willing to be participants. And so I looked at what would be the way that I would be most likely to get as many participants as possible and not get hung up um, on finding them, because really, especially if you have a very niche topic that very few teachers or very few people in your field are involved with, it's going to be even harder to get the people that you need. So I recognized this from early on, and I just went with a very simple, straightforward questionnaire that people could fill out online, because I knew that that would be the easiest way to get the data that I needed. So pretty much as soon as getting IRB approval, I went and I sought out the participants that I needed, and I got that data back. Actually, very fortunately, I got it back relatively quickly. And so what that allowed me to do is that allowed me to draft my first draft before sending it to the editor, and get things sorted out prior to turning in anything at the beginning of the chapter. And so I'd mentioned that I'd been working with an editor prior to the required chapter 5. By when we get to chapter 5, which would be the next chapter, you are required to have an editor, and you don't have to wait that long though. And I recognize that just for peace of mind, it made more sense to get an editor earlier. Yes, it does cost more when you're working each chapter, but once again, that peace of mind, knowing that I'm less likely to have to repeat a chapter, it was worth it for me. And so I was able to get editor last year, and it's been great. So going back to finding your participants. So if you find yourself in a position where you're in week 6, you're in week 7, and you're still trying to get the data from the participants, and you haven't even started really writing your chapter, you're going to be very pressed for time. And it's not to say you would be unable to finish that chapter during the time allotted, which is 10 weeks, although there are some tours out there that will say, well, it needs to be turned in prior to the end of those 10 weeks, because it is an iterative process, and maybe there are changes that need to be made, and if you're still in that iterative process after the end of the week 10, then you haven't finished, right? So just be very, very careful. If you are planning on doing interviews or focus groups, particularly if everything needs to be done in person, you need to look at what hindrances might you have on your schedule. Do you have access to places where you can get the participants that you need? Because if you don't, you're going to need to do a lot of research, and just know that it's going to be difficult for you to move forward. And so something that I believe I've said before, this is a dissertation, this is a student project, it is actual real research, and it is actually designed to help out the academic community. But by no means does it need to be your final research. What I mean by that is, if you have a really grandiose idea of research that you want to do, that's great. Maybe that is a project that you may want to do after you get your dissertation or after you get your doctorate. And you can do that as a doctoral level professional. Um, and maybe for this assignment, maybe for this dissertation, for your student work, maybe go with something that is a little bit less difficult to get through. Because timing is very important. And unless, maybe there are people out there that are totally okay if the dissertation process takes years longer than necessary. But I know many people aren't, and many people are trying to follow along the timeline and faithfully get through every course in order to reach their estimated graduation time on time. So, that would be a decision that's up to you. If you do want to pursue those grandiose plans and you're not afraid to have to retake some courses due to the need because you haven't finished the requirements for that course, then by all means, you can go for longer than you need. Although there is a limit on how many times you can retake a course with ACE, and I believe it's only 3 times. So if it's going to take more than, and that's roughly 9 months, right? So if it's going to take a year to just get your data, it's probably something you need to reconsider. Okay, so we're going to start off at the beginning of the chapter with our normal forms. There's a bunch of forms that you do, mandatory verification. There's usually some type of acknowledgement. And then generally you're putting in information, your completed information from your previous chapters. So your tour is kind of up to date with what you've been doing. So that's a really easy start. I don't think you're actually turning in anything for this new chapter in terms of written material until module 2 or 3. You do have to turn in things like chair verification form, essentially things that shows that you followed the IRB protocol in terms of getting your participants, doing your research. You followed everything. And so there is some paperwork you actually have to do prior to conducting the research. So just an FYI, I did that after IRB, which was technically last term, and I got the paperwork that showed that I was approved, and that's fine. But when I took the new course, when I took the Chapter 4 course, I was told that I had to get updated paperwork that showed a dead date that was I had a date that was signed from my dissertation committee from this term. So just recognize that you may have to redo the paperwork again. Okay, so the chapter length is going to be at least 10 pages. I believe some other students in the cohort have mentioned that there is a maximum of 25 pages. Just be cognizant of that. I know some people can write a lot easier than others, and it just kind of comes to you more naturally. I think mine ended up being maybe 11 or 12 pages, and it might have been a little bit longer, and I was cut down as I went. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was somewhere around there. And that doesn't include front matter. That doesn't include your references. That doesn't include any appendices. With that stuff, it's maybe 30, 40 pages, but you got to remember that stuff isn't really anything that you haven't already done. The appendices are pretty much straight from your dissertation proposal, your references. I didn't have many, if any, new references, so I already had all that information. I just needed to plug it into Chapter 4. And then your front matter was the same as it's been previously. So, you're really only doing 10 to 25 pages of new material. So don't get wrapped up necessarily in, oh my gosh, my proposal is going to be my Chapter 4 is going to be 40 something pages. You're only really taking just the actual chapter and putting it into your dissertation proposal afterwards. So you're not really adding 40 pages of new stuff. And then also note that one thing, and I believe I mentioned it last chapter, you will have to change the verbs. Once you get approved and once you actually do the research, the verbs from chapters 1 through 3, you will need to change those to past tense because you have done the research in chapter 4, and so therefore everything is past tense. In the dissertation proposal, you're saying what you're going to do. Originally in chapters 1, 2, 3, you're saying what you're going to do, but now you're saying what you have done. So just make sure to note that. Yeah, so much of the previous classes, like if you had set up your concept paper and you didn't have to make many changes, you're very lucky because you have a lot of the information that you need in terms of setting up these chapters in the dissertation. It really helps with getting through the chapter in an efficient manner. And even some of the res classes that you took before concept paper really help you get through this chapter, not easy, but quicker than it could be. Yeah, so the hardest part is getting the data in this chapter. You need to be careful and you need to be cognizant of that. So after you get through TOR approval, teacher of record approval, which comes in module 6. And remember, by the time we get to these chapters, the mods don't line up necessarily with what actual week you're in anymore. It did that in maybe some previous courses that you did, but by now it's just kind of, when is it done? Okay, you're moving on. You could be on mod 6 in week 3. You could be on mod 6 in week 9. So once again, keep up with that. But you're from mod 6, you're going to be sent to your committee to get approval from your DC and your CM, your dissertation chair, and your committee member. Once they give approval and they're satisfied, they will send you back to your TOR for final approval, and that's what I just recently got. And then you'll get that check mark for 10. And then since I finished early last term as well, you're just kind of hanging out for a week or two, depending on when you finish, and you're waiting for that complete check. But that actually I don't believe that even comes until after the course is actually over, and then that officially moves you on to the next course. And so the next course, next time I make a video, which will hopefully be saying once again that I've completed the next course, will be 6561, which is the end of the dissertation. And then really all I have left from this point is the end of the dissertation and then defending the dissertation, which from what I've seen, that course comes really fast. You actually defend the dissertation very early in the first few weeks. So I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully, if there's no setbacks, that would be sometime late summer, which would be amazing. So I'm really looking forward to that. But if you have any questions, if there's anything that I missed, please put the comments or just put a comment below. Ask me. I try to get a lot of information in these videos. I know the last one was really long, so I was trying not to go as long this time, but I do want to make sure you guys get your questions answered, and I want to make sure we have many more ACE alums in the future. I'm really excited about the direction of the college. I actually saw recently there was a commercial that ACE posted on their YouTube, and it had over 100,000 likes. Or not 100,000 likes, I'm sorry, 130,000 views. And so that was exciting to see. It means that, even though it's a relatively newer college, I believe it's about 20 years old now, it's good to know that people are seeing ACE, and it's kind of cool, and especially on something like LinkedIn, seeing that there's a lot of ACE alums out there. So, all right, great. Well, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time.